Welcome to Battleground, now here 5 days a week, focused on the voters in the 7 swing states that will decide this election: Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, North Carolina, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Democrats wrap up their week-long Chicago convention with Kamala Harris officially accepting the party's nomination, while Donald Trump heads to the border to tout one of his strongest issues. Plus, both campaigns making their pitch to young voters in our swing states. Why voters 18 to 34 could be a deciding demographic come November. Then, with the percentage of Asian American voters on the rise in many of our swing states, we look for some clues as to how this could tilt the race for either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. I'm Cupp, and with 74 days until the 2024 election, this is Battleground.
But when we Democrats talk about freedom, we mean the freedom to make a better life for yourself and the people that you love. Freedom to make your own health care decisions. And yeah, your kids' freedom to go to school without worrying about being shot dead in the hall.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz taking his turn at the bat during the Democratic National Convention in Chicago last night. A re-energized Democratic Party now hoping to build on the momentum that Kamala Harris has brought to this race. While Donald Trump and J.D. Vance continue their swing state stops, highlighting national security issues yesterday in North Carolina and with Trump at the Arizona border today. But all eyes are on Kamala Harris tonight at the DNC, perhaps her biggest opportunity yet as the Democratic nominee to appeal to swing state voters. For more from Chicago, I'm pleased to be joined once again by Jason Calvi from Fox 6 News in Milwaukee. Jason, let's start with Tim Walz last night. You and I have been talking all week about how Walz needs to help in Wisconsin and Michigan. What have you been hearing specifically from people from Wisconsin about his speech?
Well, it really depends. You know, we're talking to Wisconsin Democrats, including the delegates here at the United Center in Chicago, and they're really enthused, energetic, really on fire now. They said that the pick of Governor Walz was a perfect pick to win states like Wisconsin. They're talking about that pep talk that the Coach Walz, as they call him, gave last night here at the United Center. Really, there was the humanity of it all, humanizing the Minnesota governor. Many people not knowing who he was 2 weeks ago. Governor Who was a common refrain, but really humanizing it. We saw that the picture of Governor Walz's son tearing up and just saying that, you know, that's my dad, very proud of his father on that national and world stage.
When Tim Walz was tapped as Kamala Harris's VP, I made a mental note of the first statement the Trump campaign sent out, referring to Walz as a West Coast wannabe. He certainly didn't sound like a West Coast wannabe to me last night. Did he to you, or do you think folks in that room saw it that way?
Right, yeah. I mean, kind of went through the checklist of all of the things with his Midwestern credentials. You know, growing up in a very small town in Nebraska, he walked out with that John Mellencamp small town song. You know, when you think about some of the things he ticked off in his speech, introducing himself to the world, he talked about how he was a hunter in Wisconsin, in the Midwest. We have a big hunting culture, especially here in Wisconsin. And he talked about that. He talked about being a National Guardsman. He talked about being a coach and a school teacher. I mean, these are things that are resonating with people in the Midwest. Still a lot of questions for voters in swing states like Wisconsin about who they're actually going to vote for when it comes to Election Day, but definitely an introduction last night to this new man on the stage.
And finally, Jason, having now covered both the RNC and the DNC, it seems like both conventions really did succeed in energizing their bases. Give me some of your takeaways from both of those conventions this week.
Yeah, Essie, I mean, both conventions absolutely electric, with enthusiasm from the base, and these are the people that are going to be out there, the grassroots, really knocking on doors, calling you, texting you, really trying to get you to vote one way or the other. And what we're also seeing, look at, we're in Chicago, we were just in Milwaukee, right up 94, the interstate there, and it just shows how important the Midwest is to winning the White House. When you look at that blue wall from 92 to 2012, states like Wisconsin voted reliably Democratic. There were cracks in that blue wall come 2016 under President Donald Trump at that point. The question now really is, where are these voters in states like Michigan, in states like ours of Wisconsin? Where are they going to fall come Election Day?
Yeah, and we're going to be looking at a couple things coming up. We're going to be looking at the ratings, right? Which convention maybe had the better ratings, and then those first polls after the DNC to see if there's a significant bump. So I'm sure we'll talk to you again. Jason Calvi from Fox 6 News in Milwaukee, reporting for us all week from Chicago. Thanks so much for being there and for doing all that great reporting for us.
Great to be with you, Essie. Thanks.
Up next, how both campaigns are vying for young voters in swing states. But first, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance yesterday in North Carolina laying out their national security agenda. Battleground will be right back.
And we're very close to a third world war, and don't kid yourself. Every American was safer under President Trump. In fact, the entire world was safer when I sat behind that beautiful, resolute desk in the Oval Office.
It's a hard election to have as your first election. You know, the country's so split, and I feel like either way I go, you know, a lot of the things will not be solved. A lot of our problems will not be fixed.
It's kind of concerning. I'm kind of worried about it.
So it's cool. I mean, it's an unprecedented moment in history.
At least she's not like 100 years old.
First black woman president, that would be dope.
Welcome back to Battleground. Young voters there from our swing states talking about the election. Every election cycle, we hear so much about young and first-time voters and the hope for both sides to win over as many young people ages 18 to 29 as possible. The only problem is that historically, younger voters haven't voted anywhere near as consistently as, say, baby boomers and other reliable voting blocs. Consider these numbers. In the 2022 midterm elections, barely a quarter of voters age 18 to 29 cast a ballot compared to over 63% of voters 60 and older. That's a huge difference. And even in the 2020 presidential race, which saw record youth voter turnout was still far below that of older Americans. Just over 50% for younger voters and nearly 80% for older ones. So that is the dilemma for both campaigns, how to engage with a voting bloc that can be difficult to get out to the polls. For more on the elusive quest for the youth vote, I'm joined by Christian Pass, senior politics reporter with Vox. Christian, I just want our audience to know we are not holding you captive. You are not in a hostage video. You were literally covering the DNC, traveling all night, and this is the spot you found to do our show, and we appreciate you.
Of course, no, I'm very happy to be here with you.
Not against your will, okay? In 2012, Obama lost voters 30 and older in then battleground states Florida, Ohio, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. But he won those 4 states in part because he won majorities of young voters there. Could we see young people make that kind of a difference this year?
Well, it might sound cliche to say that every vote counts, every vote matters,
yeah.
But especially in battleground states, and those that you noted are places that have pretty big college student populations, and college students are probably a little more tuned in, yeah. So it's going to be important to turn out those voters.
And Christian, recent history shows us that getting young people to vote, it's a challenge, and that's true for Republicans and Democrats. Why is that?
One thing that's important to remember is that young people exist, especially in this election, in a very different media environment and ecosystem than even younger generations in past elections. I mean, I've written and reported a bit about TikTok and how different the views of people who use TikTok, especially if you're younger, tend to be from those who are not TikTok users.
Yeah.
The way that they get informed about things is very different from the way older generations are getting informed and the way younger generations in the past have too.
Yeah, and that leads me into this next question. When Kamala Harris became the nominee just over a month ago, she was met by a flurry of social media and online buzz, things like Brat Summer, the coconut meme. Has that been a burst of energy among young voters toward the Democratic ticket, or do they read this as sort of older Dems trying to pander to them?
I think the important thing to recognize from memes, the power that they have, is something that campaigns and traditional media like us might not be able to, hold anymore, which is saturating younger people with messages, uplifting messages, a change, what people describe as a breath of fresh air, both in the candidate and even in the way that people talk about politics. Because, leading into the debate, the vibes were pretty rotten. People weren't necessarily positive or optimistic, especially younger folks, feeling like they didn't necessarily have a choice in what candidates were being offered to them. And might want a bit of a change, a bit of a separation from the past. And I think what the memes really showed were essentially a combination of positive grassroots kind of enthusiasm,
right,
and also a willingness to tune back in and maybe be a little bit more curious about who Kamala Harris even is.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about Donald Trump. He's also been reaching out to younger audiences with appearances with people like Logan Paul and Theo Vaughn, people like my parents don't even know who those people are, of course. But is this a good strategy for him?
I mean, it's definitely something, and it's definitely, they need to do something, right? Because the thing, especially with younger people, there is a pretty significant kind of divide between how much young people support Democrats or how much young people lean into identifying as progressive or liberal in certain aspects, and the willingness to even consider conservatives or Republicans. And so the key here is that the Republican Party, and especially Donald Trump, really need to get in front of young people, and especially for a lot of younger folks who might not remember the golden escalator, might not remember some of the comments that Donald Trump made in 2016, even into 2020. I mean, that's definitely a place where Republicans and Donald Trump definitely want to make some inroads and at least chip away at some of the resurgence in Democratic support among that group.
Christian Paz from Vox, thanks so much. We really appreciate your terrific reporting.
Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, you're free. Go be free. For more on all of this, visit us at battlegroundnews.com or click on the QR code here. You can sign up for our newsletter, download our interactive swing state map, and find our social media links. And if you miss an episode, that's all right. You can catch up on YouTube or through our podcast. Up next, why the increase of Asian American voters in many of our swing states could make a big difference in this election. And the Democratic National Convention has gone above and beyond to include Gen Z voters and young influencers in its programming. At Olivia Juliana posted on Instagram, for the first time in history, 2 Gen Z Texans took the stage at the DNC. We are proud to be from Texas. We are proud to be Latino. We are proud to be American. Young conservatives have been equally vocal across Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram, supporting Trump's counter-programming events and taking jabs at the Harris-Walz campaign. Battleground will be right back. Welcome back to Battleground. Asian Americans have been the fastest growing group of eligible voters in the United States over the past 2 decades, with a jump of over 15% in just the last 4 years. And among our 7 swing states, Nevada has the highest percentage of eligible voters who are Asian American, in a state that is now neck and neck. The fight for Asian American voters there and in other swing states could make the difference in November. For more on this, I'm pleased to be joined by Amy Chin from the New York Times, and you're actually working on a story right now about Nevada and Asian American voters. Amy, it's so good to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
What can you tell us about your reporting so far?
I think what I found in Nevada was really interesting. I wanted to go there because, as you mentioned, that the top 10 to 11% of the electorate there is Asian American. Yeah. And when I found there, I went after Vice President Harris, became the presumptive nominee. And I found that actually people there are quite mixed still. Nevada is a place where I think more than many other states, people go there because it's affordable. Because of that, a lot of the Republican messaging about the economy really resonates with the population there. I met many people who said they were planning to vote for former President Trump because of that. And yet, you still see people because of the anti-Asian hate that happened during the pandemic, because of other various sort of issues or qualms that they had about former President Trump, that they said that they were planning to support Democrats too. But overall, it was a very mixed picture.
You wrote that Asian American voters tend to favor Democrats, but that when it comes to party affiliation, it's actually more complicated. Explain that.
Yeah, so, in 2020, Asian Americans voted 2-1 for Biden. They have, in recent years, primarily voted Democrat. But we are seeing that there is data showing that they tend to have weaker party affiliation. Asian Americans are twice as likely than the general electorate to call themselves independent. And so I think what we're seeing there is that they are probably more open to messaging from different parties, and that they could be more persuadable. One big reason why this is because Asian Americans are the only racial group where the majority of the electorate is actually foreign born. They didn't grow up in traditionally Democratic or Republican households. And so, as a result, many of them are sort of voting for the first, second, or third time, and they're still kind of trying to figure out what their party preferences are, and therefore, could be more open to targeting.
You also talk about how diverse the Asian American voter group is. It's not a homogenous bloc, right?
Definitely. Asian Americans are not a monolith. It's a region that covers everywhere from Japan to India and down to Southeast Asia as well.
Yeah.
There's numerous languages spoken, many countries and religions represented. And so that makes it a big challenge, honestly, when it comes to outreach. When you're reaching out to Hispanic or Latino voters, Spanish is by far, the primary working language. If you're doing the same thing for the Asian population, you're going to need people who speak Chinese, who speak Hindi, who speak Vietnamese, Tagalog, many different languages. And so that makes things, that are pretty basic and essential to a political operation like polling, like door knocking, all of that make really, really difficult.
And complicated, yeah. We tend to think of large Asian American populations on the coasts, but they make up a significant block in all of our swing states, including in places like Wisconsin. Tell us about that.
That's right. As you mentioned, Asian Americans are the fastest growing racial demographic in the United States, and they're growing not just in California, New York, but in states like Wisconsin, like in Georgia. In Georgia, we saw that the turnout of the Asian American vote in 2020 really helped get the Democrats over the edge in the Senate races and in the presidential race as well. In Wisconsin, the largest Asian population there is actually Hmong. Hmong are generally, overall in the country are a relatively small population, but because of their relative size in Wisconsin, they are emerging as a key target here. We saw the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, visit a Hmong festival in Wisconsin recently, which sort of shows how the Democrats are prioritizing that outreach to that group. And we are also seeing, calls being put out by Democratic organizers for Hmong-speaking volunteers. And so we're really starting to see them emerge, as a very key group in this election.
Really fascinating stuff. Amy Chin from the New York Times. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we'll have you back. Up next, we look at where both camps are putting their campaign cash in this race as we start following the money in swing state spending. But first, let's hear from swing state voters about the importance of voting. Battleground, we'll be right back.
One person is not going to hold up this country. There has to be a whole network, a huge network of people that love liberty and stand up for it.
Most of your population doesn't vote, for one, because they think it doesn't matter because of special interest groups who have money. Great. But if you all voted, none of that would matter.
Even if you feel like your one little vote would not help, just do it. It will help.
I think it's sort of rigged, but in case it's not, I will.
Welcome back to Battleground. In the classic American political thriller, All the President's Men, a common refrain is follow the money. And when it comes to presidential races, tracking campaign cash often tells you a lot about the state of the race, especially in our swing states. The 2024 election is expected to be the most expensive in U.S. history, with both parties likely to spend over $10 billion with a B. That money goes to a lot of things, paying for pollsters, hiring campaign staff, printing yard signs. But the vast majority of it goes toward advertising, and both camps have tens of millions of ad dollars in the bank, gearing up for a post-Labor Day TV blitz. And when you look at each of our 7 swing states, following the advertising dollars gives us clues as to how the race is shaping up. Because it's not just evidence that a campaign is working hard in that state. It's sometimes an indication that a campaign is being forced to dump more money into a state they once thought was safe. These stats are from the Wall Street Journal and Ad Impact, and very notably do not include money being spent by PACs and super PACs. We'll break that down next time we follow the money. And these are the figures since Kamala Harris replaced Joe Biden on the ticket, so just over a month of ad spending. We'll start in Arizona. $11 million has already been spent there, but the Trump campaign has spent $4 million more. Arizona is a key piece of Donald Trump's electoral puzzle. In Georgia, Trump is also outspending Harris, but we'll see if that remains the case over the coming weeks. In all-important Michigan, the Harris campaign has made this one of their top priorities, spending over $10 million compared to Trump's $7.5 million. North Carolina is going to be one to watch for so many reasons. Since entering the race, Kamala Harris has made up significant ground there after Trump had been leading Joe Biden by a comfortable margin. However, and this is significant, when you look at current spending levels, the Trump campaign is spending twice as much as the Harris campaign. In Nevada, both campaigns have spent about the same, approaching $2 million each. But Trump has been leading there fairly consistently. Will Democrats up the ante there and take a run at Nevada's 6 electoral votes? We'll see. And a reminder, these are just the ad dollars being spent by each campaign since the end of July and does not include money from PACs. Okay, now to the biggest prize in this election, Pennsylvania. They have poured combined over $40 million into that Commonwealth, a staggering number that is likely to double or even triple by Election Day. And finally, Wisconsin, where both campaigns have been racking up a lot of hotel points of late. Kamala Harris is already outspending Donald Trump there by about $2 million. Democrats are keenly aware that Hillary Clinton lost Wisconsin in 2016 and are likely to keep outspending Republicans between now and November 5th. Okay, so there you have it. We'll continue to follow the money and look for clues as to who may win each of our swing states and ultimately the presidency. That's it for now. I'm S.E. Cupp. See you next time here on Battleground.